Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the AJ Review Show. We've got three fantastic films for you this week, so without any further deliberation, let's get on with it. First film of the week is...
There is something that your daddy and I...
There's something that Mummy and me want to...
We want to talk to you about. It's a bit serious, though.
Obviously, the film I'm talking about is We Live in Time. I'm sure a lot of people who've seen this film have also come out with tears in their eyes. I am not remotely surprised by that. I came out with tears in my eyes. The way that the film is cut together builds this relationship between Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh gradually. So it's shot in I would consider quite a classic Tarantino way, where it doesn't show you all the information in a chronological order. It cuts from what we consider the present day back to the past so that we can see kind of every angle of their relationship.
I ran you over. Sorry.
And by the end of the film, by sort of the crux of the end of the film, you are just so emotionally invested in what they have created together that, I mean, I didn't want it to end. If there's somehow they could have made a trilogy out of it, I probably would have watched it. But it left you wanting more. But somehow simultaneously, I felt so satisfied with how beautiful the ending was. It really is a superb film. Not going to give too much away plot-wise, but I do definitely want to talk about how amazing Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are. I texted my brother after this and told him that I now think Andrew Garfield is one of the best actors out there. He has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. I think he's won a couple of BAFTAs, Golden Globe. He was nominated for Hacksaw Ridge and Tick, Tick, Boom. Seen Hacksaw Ridge several times. I haven't quite watched Tick, Tick, Boom. I'm not the biggest musical guy in the world. But just, he clearly is one of those people that you can put him into any role and he can adapt and absolutely smash it. I mean, the emotion that himself and Florence Pugh bring into this film is really quite amazing, and it's something that I massively appreciated as a fan of his work. Going to this, I've not always been the biggest Florence Pugh fan. I've seen Don't Worry Darling, which I don't think a lot of people are a very big fan of, but I'd seen a little bit. What else have I seen of hers? I can't think off the top of my head, but wasn't the biggest fan of her work. But between the two of them, the reality and the realisticness of the relationship that they build is absolutely world engulfing. It's so well put together. You don't just see, it's not painted out like this sort of Mamma Mia happy like song and dance. You see every element of their relationship from all angles. You see the good and the bad and the compromise between them to try to make things work. And honestly, it made for an absolutely phenomenal watch. I would give it 5 stars. I was quite happily sat on 4 stars right up until the final scene, but that last little bit, just the last couple of scenes, if you have seen the film, if you haven't seen it, you will 100% know what I mean soon. The last couple of scenes in the film just push it that little bit further. It gives you breadcrumbs as you go, but that last little bit of film just ties it all together so wonderfully. Like I said, great performances. The soundtrack actually is haunting. I had it stuck in my head for 2 days after. You don't even necessarily need to watch the film to understand how lovely the soundtrack is. You can just listen to the soundtrack on its own. And it's one of those rare films where the main soundtrack, the main piece of the film, can and does reflect the entire film. So it's quite light and playful, but also dark at times. There's one other film I would say that the main soundtrack does that, and that's Her with Joaquin Phoenix, where he basically dates it's an AI, but there's a piece of music in that, the main theme, that is just, not only is it beautiful, but it perfectly reflects what the film is and the emotion in it. So honestly, We Live in Time, great title as well. Like I said, the way it cuts between past and present, 5 stars for me. Really, really great.
I'm not interested in a treatment that accidentally worked.
I am guilty of looking ahead instead of running me at you.
Okay, the second film we are going on to now is...
You tramped all the way from Minnesota.
Why is that? I wanted to catch a spark.
The film I'm talking about is A Complete Unknown. Straight off the bat, it'd be very hard to talk about A Complete Unknown without talking about how fantastic Timothée Chalamet is in it. I have seen... First time I ever watched of his, it wasn't Dune, although obviously I've seen Dune. The whole world over has seen the first Dune and the second Dune film. But Call Me By Your Name was the first film I saw him in. And obviously, I mean, I think I started to come around to Timothy after I'd seen Wonka. I think Wonka was a really great film. I don't think everyone agrees with that, but he showed a different side of his acting ability. And then he showed another side with Dune. And then if you needed any more convincing that he is a fantastic actor, that I believe he will win an Oscar. I don't think he's going to win it at this set of Oscars. I think Ralph Fiennes will probably win it for Conclave. But his acting ability in these films, and such a standout role of him playing Bob Dylan, it is just there's no question in my mind anymore that he is one of the greatest and will go on to become one of the greatest actors of all time. I really loved how the film moved along at a good pace. You get to see a very young Bob Dylan all the way through to sort of later in his career when his music has changed, and the people that supported him at the start, he started to have different views with, and not everyone's agreeing and not everyone's on the same page that they once were. But I thought the pacing was really nice. I did find that I thought it was a slightly too long, 20 minutes too long. But that is a problem that I film with. It's not a lot of films that I find it with, but I think biopics do have a bit of a tragedy in that they do tend to drag along a little bit after the point where you're as engaged as you were. Like I said, 20 minutes earlier. I thought it was very interesting how the two women in his life heavily influence him. I haven't read his book. I've done a limited amount of research on him, but from the things that I can gather, Timothée Chalamet's representation and performance as Bob Dylan is incredibly accurate. And it's just funny to see that a man with so much natural talent is so affected by these two women in two very different ways. But it made for really, really interesting watching. And even though he has this great talent, he is only a man, which I just thought was really funny. Did a great job of showcasing Bob Dylan's natural talent as a singer, as a songwriter, how he just appears to have always had this incredible gift.
Let's say no one wants to hear what a kid wrote last month.
Well, I like your songs.
Or, from what the film portrays, he's always had quite an incredible gift. I have to give a huge shout out to Boyd Holbrook and James Mangold. Unfortunately, I don't know them personally, but Boyd Holbrook, first time I ever saw him was in the film Logan, which was also directed by James Mangold. In my opinion, probably the greatest Marvel film of all time. It's almost flawless, but Boyd Holbrook playing the main villain, that first time I ever saw him. Since then I've seen him in Bike Riders, which he was also very good in. And obviously in this, he plays a very famous Johnny Cash. I am disappointed to think and to say that I don't think we will ever get a Boyd Holbrook, Johnny Cash film. We already have Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix, which I haven't seen, but I've heard good things. But I'm disappointed that we won't get to see any more of this absolutely fantastic iteration of Johnny Cash. You can't even tell it's Boyd Holbrook. It took me a little while, and I was looking. I was like, I'm pretty sure I heard Boyd Holbrook was in this film, and then he's right in front of your face. I also didn't know that the two of them, Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash, had any sort of relationship, so that was just really interesting more than anything. It's definitely made me more of a fan of Bob Dylan. Definitely made me more of a fan of his work. I have to admit, I've been listening to quite a lot of his music now. Very talented songwriter. But it's made me, after seeing the film and talking to my dad about him, and then the little bit of research I've done, and some of the reviews I've read, it doesn't sound like Bob Dylan was the nicest person in the world, which I just think sort of adds to his character really. But yeah, I think I'm more of a fan of his music, but I'm less of a fan of Bob Dylan as a person. And I also think it's really interesting how if you are in a musical place or a sort of a city place with a lot of creative types, how Bob Dylan's fashion sense and style has really come round, like that, the puffy hat he was wearing, the big scarves and like massive oversized jackets has really come back round, and I just think it's really funny. I would give this film probably a 4 out of 5. Chalamet's performance great. Ed Norton's fantastic in it. He plays sort of this like country bumpkin is not fair to say, but he plays a sort of like simple country man, lives in a wood log cabin, and gets his own water, and he lives a very simple life, and he's almost sort of like the mentor to Bob Dylan before. They don't really fall out, but he wants what he believes is best for Bob, and Bob just wants to keep evolving with the times and with the music. So that was really interesting. But yeah, I would probably give it a 4 stars. Really good film. Fantastic for a musical, not a musical, but a film biopic about a musician.
You're kind of an asshole, Bob.
Moving on to my final film, I am talking about...
I never flew U.S. Marshal before. Why is he all chained up?
I have to get him to New York so he can testify against the Moretti crime family.
Okay, hey, you're the boss.
Yes, of course, the film you have just seen is Flight Risk, starring Mark Wahlberg. So, I got a few tuts when I told people I'd gone to see this film. I'm a big fan of going to see the blockbuster films. Why wouldn't you? Godzilla vs. Donkey Kong, I've seen those. You know, Star Wars was a blockbuster. Not comparing the two even remotely. They're vastly different films in quality. But going to watch a blockbuster, I don't think this was a blockbuster, but I am a big fan of silly, humoured films that they almost want to trip you up by making you think it's this and it's that. So I couldn't really understand if this was supposed to be an action film or a thriller or a comedy, and it kind of meshes the three all together. I think it worked quite well.
Is it always this bumpy?
You know, a number of passengers have left their lunch up here. I can open a snack bar.
Is it ever going to win a big Academy Award? No. You know, it's a silly film, relatively silly, you know. The premise of the film is that the guy that plays Venom in the third Spider-Man film, I think is Topher Grace, it might be the other way around, is basically on the run from Mafia. He was like an accountant for them, and now he's legged it. And I think he was stealing money as well, and he's been picked up in, I believe it was Canada, by the feds, and is being flown back to New York to testify against him because they're going to shut down this massive like mafiosa or like whole organization. They get on the plane, and your boy Mark Wahlberg is the pilot. So he's talking to this like federal agent, and it is very funny. So Topher Grace, and the female lead is Michelle Dockery. So she's been in a lot of like several seasons of Downton Abbey. My biggest problem with her was her acting seemed incredibly stiff in the film. It felt like she didn't really know how she fit in between Mark Wahlberg's like natural comedy and Topher Grace's awkward comedy. Like between the two of them, there's quite a lot of like one-liners and funny moments, and she's just sort of like this stiff police officer, like agent, and it's like she doesn't really know how she's supposed to fit in because she has the moral high ground for a bit, and then she sort of loses it. It's a good role, but I don't think it's a particularly great cast for her. Between the three of them though, perfectly, you know, believable for a film where Mark Wahlberg turns out to be bald after about half an hour. You know, a storyline that runs through it enough to keep you interested. There's a couple of little twists in there which add to it enough that, again, like it keeps it interesting. I thought it was very odd that I was like looking at Topher Grace, like say Venom, and I was like, this dude looks really familiar. Where? And then I suddenly got it. I was like, I've genuinely never seen him in anything other than the third Spider-Man film, and then a film where he's a hostage, sort of in a plane. He's not really a hostage, but he's an informant in a plane. I've just never seen him in anything else. Like I said, very, very entertaining film, and that's where the quality is. You know, the CGI in it is not very good. The script is a bit cringy at points. There's a line in it where Mark Wahlberg's like, somebody need a pilot or something like that, and it's very on the nose. But you know, it was fun that they managed to do so much with them just in a plane. You know, it is just the same set, bar a little bit at the beginning and a little bit at the end. It is just the same set over and over again. I know the only other film I think is Locke with Tom Hardy, where he's just in a car the whole time. Very, very different films. It is literally just Tom Hardy speaking to a phone, and obviously in this one there's 3 actual actors. But, you know, creative for what they can manage. Some very creative action scenes, given that it's like a little prop plane, and it was pretty interesting. I enjoyed watching some of it. But yeah, the story running through it is there, but it's not particularly strong. I lost interest and sort of track of the story. It wasn't particularly hard to follow. It's just I did just sort of lose the story. There's sort of 2 elements of the story that they do play well together, but equally it's like a 90-odd minute film. Let's not try to overcomplicate it. Like I said, Mark Wahlberg, very funny. I think he's quite a funny actor in general, and I enjoyed him. Like I said, the 3 of them together, perfectly believable. Michelle Dockeray's acting, I wasn't a huge fan of, and Topher Grace is just sort of like this weird extra in the back. Although the film is sort of focused on him, the focus switches as the film goes on to Michelle Dockeray's character. But no, you know, I enjoyed it. If you're looking for a laugh on a Friday night and you're with your boys, it's perfect. You know, it's a sort of Kevin Hart, Dwayne Johnson, silly, like almost Jumanji, Central Intelligence. It's sort of action. It's slightly more serious, but there's comedy elements to it. So I would give it a pretty comfortable 3 stars out of 5. That's a good film, nice, entertaining.
Y'all need a pilot?
And that is it. Those are my 3 films of the week. We Live in Time, A Complete Unknown, and Flight Risk. I would say if you can get to still see We Live in Time, run to the cinema to see it. Complete Unknown, if you're a fan of Bob Dylan, or you just want to learn more about him, you know, do it. He's very clearly a very talented man, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. And Flight Risk, if you want to laugh, you know, that's there for you as well. So thank you very much for watching. That's AJ Reviews.